It's really hard to describe the exact moment when you start thinking of the pivot. So it wasn't a moment. And I think, as you would ask many people in the fintech space who believe in blockchain or some form of crypto and are involved with crypto, I think it's always a journey. The same happened with me. I think, prior to moving into the crypto ecosystem, I was already dabbling with different forms of crypto, not just buying and investing in, but also playing with solutions that was helping me borrow or do other sort of replace traditional banking in some ways with some of the crypto ecosystems. Subsequently was at eBay, building the shipping and logistics ecosystem for eBay very early on when they were threatened by Amazon and just about to enter the market. So there was some really bits of interesting experience there in the shipping logistics space. And then was part of the founding team at Sendle, worked very closely with the founders at Sendle to actually build out the Sendle ecosystem, which was Australia's first carbon neutral shipping provider. At this stage, when I left India, in very early stages of its tech boom, it was a lot hungrier in some way, a lot more fast growing as a market. I think it still is. It's playing a lot of catch up in some ways. I think Australia was a bit more established as a market. That sort of translated into better access to capital. I would often pay my suppliers using crypto in China. So it was a lot easier for me to actually build a business using crypto because I'd already dabbled in stable coins in some way, shape, and form, understood how to sort of do transactions without having to take permission from the bank. So permissionlessness was the key sort of hook for me to start looking at crypto more seriously. There will be certain use cases where traditional banking and the traditional finance and the traditional central banks don't solve an edge case or a use case. And crypto is trying to fill those cracks and gaps in the developing world, right? In places like Australia, where banking is robust and people have access and 80-90% of the population is banked, I think we struggle to see the use case for crypto. But there are other parts of the world, El Salvador, Argentina, and all these places where the traditional banks and the governments have actually failed. You actually see the access to crypto as a critical point. I have always looked at corporates as a good pit stop in my career before I go out again for 3 to 5 years to start building again. I was traveling in Europe. I was caught up in a blizzard in a winter cabin in Norway, in minus 19 degrees. When I had this epiphany for 3 days in a row, just stuck looking at snow, and I kind of had this epiphany where I was like, hey, I got to change something in my life. And I know it always sounds like as if this was all planned and it sounds great, but when it was happening, you didn't have that clarity. But in hindsight, it sounds like that's what really happened. And I think at that point, I realized that I've been through this on this horse of a VC-funded startup several times now. And it's great to a certain degree when you win some and you lose some, but it's almost perpetually being in what sometimes I refer to as the bread line. You get the bread, you go back into the bread line. Business is about building profitability. And if you double click on that, you go, profitability comes from adding value. So you cannot be profitable if you're not adding any value in the industry or to the people that you're surrounded by. I find a lot of similarities between e-commerce and crypto. And when I say similarities, not just in tech, but also how people got these two technologies wrong in the very early days. So when I was back in India, in the very early days, and we were building an e-commerce business, a lot of time brick and mortar retail businesses would always challenge us and say, so do you see a future where everything is bought online? How will you buy a sofa online? How will you buy a shoe online? And so on and so forth. And it took me a while to understand that